Yo, what's up YouTube? GoToGram back here with another one, and the day is finally here. Today we have the July 18th, 2023 patch notes at long last. This patch is 1.1.0 for what will be Season 1 on July 20th. So without further ado, let's break this down and I'll give you guys my opinion on things. Now I'm looking at the patch notes on maxroll.gg and I'll have the link to that down in the description. This is just because I feel like they do an amazing job at presenting information, and with this specific rendition of the patch notes, the author and editor, Dreadscythe, has added in embeddings for all the items, skills, and other things referenced in the notes. Getting us started off here with the new uniques and aspects, we have 6 new uniques. The first one being a non-class specific unique, Barbarian. With it, you gain a shrine effect for every 10 to 20 seconds, after you kill an elite that is. This can only occur once every 30 seconds though. I think it'll end up being very strong. However, rarity aside, in my opinion, most of the time, shrine effects are often worthless. For example, something like a conduit shrine is good in theory, but without enemies or against a boss, it's often not as effective as your fully maxed out class. That is, if it's even effective at all. That being said though, I do like this one, and I think overall it's going to be more than viable, and I'm sure if somebody gets their hands on it, they'll be able to come up with a super synergized build. I am curious to see all the substats on all these items though, as they aren't currently listed, but moving on, Barbarian here is getting a new sword, Azarath. Once you proc Lucky Hit, your core skills have up to a 20% chance to freeze enemies for 3 seconds, and they'll deal anywhere from 75% to 150% cold damage to them. In my opinion, this one doesn't seem all that bad. We have a few things like this as a rogue, for example, Frostburn or Penitent Greaves. This could end up being very good for the extra CC, but as you can see, if an 820 item power Azarath hits for around 6,700 damage, then the cold multiplier could make this item god tier as long as it stacks with other multipliers. Right below that though, the Druid is getting a new mace, Flesh Render, making Debilitating Roar and Blood Howl deal 50% to 100% more damage to nearby poison enemies. I think this is pretty good because poison damage from something like Werewolf Rabies build was, like, let's be real, next to none, but this should give that some use and make it a little bit more viable. Moving on though, we have a new unique offhand for Necromancer, the Lidless Wall. After you proc Lucky Hit, while you have an active Bone Storm, hitting an enemy outside of Bone Storm has up to a 5 to 25% chance to spawn an additional Bone Storm at their location. Each of your active sacrifice bonuses increases the chance by 25%, and the total number of additional Bone Storms you can have by 1. So with this, you'll literally be able to have Bone Storms everywhere. This seems very good. Once again, another good addition coming from patch 1.1.0. Here though, we have one for all the ranged rogues watching, a new bow, Eaglehorn. This will make it so that Penetrating Shot has a 30 to 80% chance to fire an arrow that bounces off walls and scenery. Hitting enemies from behind with Penetrating Shot will make them vulnerable for 3 seconds. This will make the Penetrating Shot build, which is already good, even better. A massive part of this will be the addition of being able to proc Vulnerable, as there were very little options to do this prior. Rounding out our uniques is one for Sorcerer, the Oculus. Gain the effect of Teleport Enchantment for free. When you evade using Teleport Enchantment, you are taken to a random location. Now, this one is interesting, it seems alright, I'm just not sure how the RNG aspect of it will pan out for you, as you could end up teleporting to your own doom. It seems like Sorcerer pulled the short stick this time around, but maybe we'll see some better additions and buffs later on down the road. Looking at the aspects though here, we have 7 new ones. Starting off with the non-class specific ones, we have Audacity. When there are at least 5 close enemies, stun them for 2 to 4 seconds. This can only occur once every 20 seconds. This isn't all that good, the duration is very low and it's super situational, as you have to have at least 5 close enemies, not to mention it only being able to be activated once every 20 seconds. I mean, in theory, the CC it provides is a decent utility addition, but it's nowhere comparable viability-wise when looking to other options. Below that, we have a mobility aspect, Craven. You gain 20 to 40% increased movement speed when moving away from slowed or chilled enemies. I don't necessarily like this one really at all. It seems like you'd be running away from or leaving enemies behind just to proc this effect. It seems counterintuitive to the entire concept of the game. However, pair this with something like Penitent Greaves, and I mean, who knows? For some people, this effect could end up being very useful, just not for me. But moving on to our first class-specific aspect, the Barbarian is getting an offensive aspect Astral Charge. Charge calls forth 4 Ancients who also charge, dealing 50 to 100% of normal damage. This seems like it could be insane if it scales with other multipliers. Maybe we see a charge build arise through the ranks with this new addition, but who knows. Below that, we can see that Druid is getting an offensive aspect, Subterranean. Poison Creepers active also cast Landslide in a circle around you. Earth skills deal 10 to 20% increased damage to poison enemies. Now that seems massively beneficial for the Druid, as one main downside of Landslide is its lack of AoE coverage. With this aspect, we could see a balance shift in favor for Landslide, but beyond that, this aspect is more powerful as it buffs Earth skills 10 to 20% when engaging with poison enemies. So it looks like Poison Creeper just got a whole lot better, and we'll probably be seeing a few new renditions of builds with this new aspect. This one is a massive W for Druids, and I would expect anyone using something like Diablo's Nature Fury build would be happy to see this. Now Necromancer is getting one called Gore Quills. Blood Lance will consume blood orbs to also conjure lances from them. Each additional blood lance deals 20 to 50% of the normal damage and prioritizes targeting unlanced enemies. Here, we have a bit of a buff to the blood skills. From what I know, they aren't all that good in comparison to the bone skills, so any extra help they can get to make them viable is welcomed. I like to see the underlooked skills get a bit of love, so this is a good addition in my opinion. Right here's what we've all been waiting for. The rogue is getting an aspect called Pestilent Points. Every third cast of Puncture is poison imbued with 100 to 150% of its normal potency. Now I'm very excited about this one as a rogue myself. I often find myself searching for the perfect offensive aspect or at least a good filler to put on my empty slot, and oftentimes end up being forced to settle on something that ultimately doesn't benefit me too much. However, being a poison rogue and taking advantage of the infinite poison method, using the bursting venoms aspect, this will further help me proc my poison pools. So I'll be gaining an extra method of critting with poison skills, and so I'm without a doubt planning on using it and experimenting to see how much better it can make my build. I don't think this aspect will give me a massive direct increase of damage as it is scaling off puncture, which, let's be real, does no damage and is just there to proc vulnerable, but as I stated, it could help me proc my infinite poison through my bursting venoms aspect, which in turn could give me anywhere from hundreds of thousands to millions more DPS. Like I said though, I plan on sliding this aspect on an item where I would otherwise have a worthless filler aspect, so in my opinion, this will help me a lot and is exactly what I was looking for in terms of new aspects for the rogue. Very happy about this one, and I think so far we've had a few W's all around, but this is a massive one for all us rogues. Finally here, our last aspect is going to go to the Sorcerer, Searing Wards. After spending 200 to 100 mana, your next Firewall is free to cast and will destroy incoming small missiles. This one is very interesting. I haven't seen a lot of people using Firewall, but with this addition we might see an uprising of players picking it up because one of the most annoying things in the game is ranged enemies like archers shooting arrows at you. So if you can lay a Firewall down and negate all those attacks, then it might actually have a use case in the game. All around, I think with the new uniques and aspects, all the classes got at least one W, so not bad. I'm happy because I got what I needed in the form of an offensive aspect for the rogue, but let me know how you guys feel down in the comment section. Will you be using any of the new aspects, or do you think they aren't worth the investment due to viability? Moving on though, they dropped a massive amount of bug fixes, which I love to see, but I'm not going to read all of these as I'd probably be here all day. One quick call out and shout out to Raxanarax because I would have missed this one if not for him. They fixed an issue where the outer edge of Quakes granted to the Hammer of Ancients via the aspect of Ancestral Echoes was dealing far more damage than intended. Everyone knew this one was coming, but this is going to nerf the Hodabarb quite significantly, and they didn't compensate for the changes in any way, so don't expect your Hodabarb to feel or perform the same post-patch. If you guys want to check out any of the other bug fixes for yourself, feel free to pause the video, or check out the links to the full patch notes down in the description. Like I said, as you can see, we have a metric ton of bug fixes. They just keep going, and going, and going, and going. And right here, I want to call out this change. The level requirement for sacred items will now cap at level 60, and the level requirement for ancestral items will now cap at level 80. This essentially just makes it so that when you drop a sacred or an ancestral in-game, you can still trade it or give it to an alt that's lower than you, as it won't be locked at whatever your respective level was when you dropped it. Really good addition here. I didn't understand why it wasn't like this before, as sacred items are legit worthless after entering into World Tier 4, so this again at least gives you the ability to trade them or use them on an alt without worrying about meeting an absurd level requirement, and same is to be said about the ancestral items. Moving on though, some more bug fixes, still some more bug fixes. Finally, here we go. Gameplay updates. This is what everybody's dying to see. Starting off here, Altar of Lilith unlocks are now account wide. This is huge. I know myself and others had a big gripe with having to redo these with every alt and every season. Super glad to see they listened to the community on this one and came to an agreement. Following along with the same suit, map discovery is now account wide, so to share this progression, all you have to do is just log in on your most progressed character, and then whatever you have done on there will be applied to all the characters on your account. Below that, we have Whispers will no longer reward sigil dust. I'm okay with this because Whispers aren't a main source nor a viable source of dust anyways. It seems overall loot quality though has been significantly improved for Silent Chest. This I believe is the second buff for Silent Chest, which you unlock by getting the key from the Curiosities vendor. Once again though, glad to see this. I think it's a W for these chests. They've been very lackluster going back even into the betas. The channel time for the Leave Dungeon ability has been increased from 3 to 5 seconds. Not sure why this happened. The load screens and transfer times are already abysmal and annoying. Now we have to wait 2 extra seconds when trying to leave a dungeon. I mean, come on. If you're running nightmares though, I guess you could just pop another sigil and get instant kicked out. But I'm not sure how much that's going to negate the annoyance of this change. They reduced the tendency for monsters to move around in combat so that melee characters don't have to chase down their enemies as much. This is a good change. I know there's been a lot of cases where I experienced mobs legit spinning in circles, forcing me to chase them to break the loop, so hopefully that won't happen anymore. I definitely can appreciate this change as a rogue. Wrapping up the general changes here, they added a PS5 DualSense support for PC. If you're someone who's interested in playing on your PS5 controller, that's now available. Now we have some World Tier changes to get into. The first ones being World Tier 2 Gold has been increased from 15% to 20%, and monsters now drop 15% more items. With this addition, they're trying to make World Tier 2 a bit more enticing, which they do succeed at. However, for efficiency reasons, due to being able to kill mobs easier and faster, World Tier 1 is still the best option when leveling your character, and that will especially hold true for hardcore players. I think this is a good change and will probably lure a few people into World Tier 2, but I will be sticking to World Tier 1 as I prefer to be more efficient and reach World Tier 3 as fast as possible. They also adjusted level scaling inside dungeons and most overworld territories in World Tiers 3 and 4, but mainly they're changing up the way level scaling works. Monsters will now begin to trail behind the player in level after a certain point, up to a maximum of 5 levels behind, but this change does not affect world bosses, legion events, fields of hatred, Helltide, or nightmare dungeons. So right here we can see, for example, in World Tier 3, if you are or below level 55, then the monsters will be level 55. But after that point, you will outlevel the monsters for 5 levels until you reach 60 and the monsters are 55. After that point, monsters level will trail behind you 5 levels, making it feel as if though you are more powerful until you reach level 75 or below within World Tier 4. And the process will repeat. You will outlevel the monsters for 5 levels, and then they'll trail behind you the rest of the way to 100. I think this is going to be a good change, and will make it so that you feel a steady sense of progression leveling through the game. I know the dynamic scaling Diablo 4 was using before was a bit wonky, and didn't make it feel fun to fight enemies that scale with you the whole way to 100. It looks like along with these changes, they've adjusted the way that the experience system works. First up, they buffed Whisper's experience, which is good because they gave essentially nothing, and in my opinion there's no real incentive to even do Whispers as of right now, but this could change that. But more importantly, it seems right below that we have adjustments to the way the experience system works as a whole. So as you can see here, and as most of you probably already know, pre-patch, we could only get XP bonuses for mobs up to 3 levels higher than us. This was the reason behind advising doing content 3 levels higher than you to maximize efficiency. On top of this, with the way the scaling was previous to this patch, the actual base monster experience would scale all the way up to monsters 100 levels higher than you, depending upon your world tier, as you can see here. This is the reason why power leveling and boosting within Diablo 4 is so easy and effective. However, it seems going into Season 1, they're changing all of that. Now we will get a max bonus XP reward of 15% for enemies that are 10 levels higher than us, compared to the previous 25% for 3 levels. This is a 10% reduction, and a 7 level difference in the offset required to achieve maximum XP bonus, due to each level offset being worth only 1.5, compared to the previous 5%, which started off with a base value of 10%. Going back down though, we can also see that the base XP will now only scale up to 10 levels higher than you based on which world tier you're in. Essentially, all I'm getting at and trying to explain is that this is a massive nerf in the experience you'll be getting whilst leveling. It's also a massive hindrance for any of those planning to take advantage of boosting services or strategies, so maybe think twice before you make all those alts and pay someone to level you. As you can see though, with all the changes and examples they've given, this is only meant to combat boosting techniques, making them infinitely less efficient. However, it does have some lasting effects on everyone's normal leveling journey, as those value reductions will most definitely be felt when trying to legitimately level your character from 1 to 100. We have to take into account a lot of people this preseason have been using exploits and strategies within the game that won't be available come Season 1, meaning the rate at which we all gain XP is already going to be reduced from that which we're able to achieve taking advantage of said strategies. When you add all these raw XP rate value nerfs, it seems like leveling this season is going to be a bit of a challenge in order to get what is essentially half the reward, which by all means I'm for, as long as they keep the enjoyment and engagement sustained throughout the phases of progression. I guess we'll have to see how it all feels once we're in game come July 20th though, before we make any definitive calls. I just hate to see all these nerfs to not only classes and builds, but now to XP rates. I can understand hindering some of the more hardcore players that race to 100, or just plan on getting a character leveled up fast, but these changes are going to make it so much harder for the average player to level up their character and enjoy doing so at the same time. Moving on though to the Helltide changes, it seems like they want to make the Helltides a bit more challenging, so they're raising the levels from 2 levels higher to 3, but they made the mystery chest cost 250 aberrant cinders instead of 175, which it was already hard enough to get all those cinders as a solo. This just makes it that much harder. We'll just have to be more efficient and see how it works though. I guess in turn, their idea for making up for that increase in cost, they made all interactable objects in Helltide zones have a small chance of dropping aberrant cinders now. Getting into all the juicy stuff though now, we have the balancing updates. As we can see here, the developers' notes read, as our community continues to battle the burning hells, the builds emerging from new players have shocked and delighted us. We've chosen to focus Season of the Malignant balancing updates on clear itemization disparities over redesigns of class features. The class changes are largely focused on numeric increases to skill upgrades and legendary aspects that players haven't yet found compelling. Additionally, we're changing critical strike damage paragon glyphs to empower all damage instead of core skills to enable more build strategies. That one's interesting. There are also a few class stat decreases on sources which grant extreme amounts of damage, healing, or unstoppable. In general, we prefer build-specific changes to be bonuses instead of decreases, but we feel these changes are necessary for the overall health of the game. Diablo 4 is a game that is continually evolving through seasons, thus the adjustments we make will evolve with them. So basically what they're saying is that they're going to be making a few nerfs, however they're primarily focused on buffing, and if anything seems unbalanced they'll continue to tweak it going into the future. Getting into the Barbarian changes though, Double Swing got a 1-second buff for vulnerable duration, Furious Upheaval, damage bonus per stack increased from 3 to 5%, 2% buff right there, Power Charge, cooldown reduction is now capped at 3 targets for a maximum of 9 seconds of cooldown reduction. That's actually a nerf and a quite significant one. Tactical Ground Stomp, Fury gain increased from 25 to 40. That's actually quite massive. That's a good buff. Enhanced Death Blow, damage bonuses, the bosses increased from 100 to 150%. Once again, quite a big buff right there. Enhanced Still Grasp, vulnerable duration increased from 2.5 seconds to 3 seconds. Once again, a vulnerable duration increase, that's another buff. Enhanced Rupture, damage increased from 30% to 45%, that's a buff. Warrior's Rupture, attack speed bonus increased from 20% to 30%, and duration increased from 4 seconds to 5 seconds, that's another buff. Fighter's Rupture, healing increased from 15% to 18% max life, that's very good, another buff. When it comes to the passives, Hamstring now only slows healthy enemies, and slow amount increase from 10, 20, 30% to 20, 40, 60%, another buff. Cut to the Bone, bleeding damage bonus to vulnerable reduced from 6, 12, 18% to 5, 10, 15%. That's a nerf. That actually is kind of a significant nerf. In regards to the Paragon boards, the core skill glyph for all classes will now affect all damage instead of just the said core skills. As for the aspects, as you can see across the board, we have nothing but buffs, but when it comes to the Barbarian class and the other classes, I don't know the exact specifics nor what each of these aspects does, so I can't really comment on it, but below that, as we can see in reference to the unique items, the Gore's Devastating Grips now explode every 2 seconds or after it ends, and its hit cap has been removed. Below that, Fields of Crimson, bleeding damage bonus increased from 10% to 15%, so we have some buffs here. Moving on though, it seems like Barbarian got quite a few buffs, so let's see what's in store for Druid. It looks like Enhanced Claws attack speed bonus increased from 10 to 15%, that's a buff. Storm Strike damage reduction reduced from 25 to 15%, that's actually a sizable nerf. Boulder damage increased from 33 to 46%, that's a buff, we'll take that. Savage Trample, Spirit Gain increased from 20 to 40, that's a buff. Prime Lacerate Healing increased from 3% to 5%, that's pretty good. Any survivability we can't complain about. Cataclysm, Lightning damage increased from 64% to 77%, and Tornado damage increased from 19% to 23%. Quite a good buff right there. Supreme Cataclysm, vulnerable duration increased from 2 to 3 seconds, a small buff there. Prime Cataclysm duration increased from 2 to 4 seconds, that's a doubling in duration. Prime Grizzly Rage now grants Unstoppable for 6 seconds instead of while active. I'm pretty sure that's a nerf, as it had previously been granting Unstoppable forever. As we can see underneath the passive section here, the provocation threshold required for guaranteeing overpower reduced from 35, 30, 25 to 24, 20, 16. That's actually a pretty sizable buff. As we can see here with the Spirit Boons, Masochistic now also requires a lucky hit chance of 75. That's actually a nerf. Prickle Skin Thorns increased from 0.1 to 0.15. That's a buff. Iron Skin Feather maximum life increased from 10 to 14. That's a buff. Bolster Fortify increased from 10 to 15 of max life. That's a buff. Overload damage increased from 0.2 to 0.25. That's another buff. Just like before, the core skill glyph now affects all damage instead of just the core skills. When it comes to the aspects, once again, I don't know too much about the Druid class, so I can't comment on the specifics exactly. However, if we look just below that, when it comes to the unique items, Insatiable Fury, Werebear skill ranks increase from 2 to 3, and Mad Wolf's Glee, the Werewolf skill ranks have once again been increased from 2 to 3. So those are some buffs on the unique items right there. Once again, just like the Barbarian, when it comes to the Druid, it looks like we have quite a few buffs and a few nerfs. Let's see if the Necromancer can follow suit. It looks like Initiates Decompose, slow increased from 30% to 50%, that's a buff. Paranormal Server, cast required for vulnerable reduced from 4 to 3, that's a buff. Enhanced Blood Surge, healing increased from 2.5% to 3% of max life, that's once again another buff. Enhanced Blood Lance, damage reduction for piercing, reduced from 15% to 10%, that's a buff. Bone Prison, initial essence gained, increased from 15 to 25, that's a buff. Aberrant, Iron Maiden, healing increased from 5% to 7% max life, that's a buff. Golem, move faster and unhindered through enemies when their cooldown is activated, that's another buff. Supreme Blood Wave leaves behind blood orbs earlier in its path, once again another buff. Raised Skeleton, Corpse Explosion, and Corpse Tendrils range for auto-targeting corpses on mouse and keyboard increased by 50%. Wow, looks like Necromancer is just getting a lot of buffs. Raised Skeleton, Skeletal Priest bonus damage increased from 20% to 30. Once again, another buff. What a surprise. Raised Skeleton, Skeletal Priest healing increases from 10 to 15%. Quite a good buff right there as well. When it comes to the passives, we have Evulsion, bonus damage to vulnerable, reduced from 6, 12, 18 to 5, 10, 15. That's a nerf. Transfusion, minion health increase from 15, 30, 45 to 20, 40, 60. That's a buff. Drain Vitality, Lucky hit chance increased from 25 to 30, that's a buff. Amplified damage increased from 369 to 4812, that's another buff. Here with the Book of the Dead, Necromancer's minions will now automatically resummon after respawning during a world boss fight. That's pretty good. That's a buff. Skeletal Warriors, the Defenders upgrade. Thorns Inherited increase from 40 to 50. That's alright. Skeletal Mages, the Shadow upgrade. Attacks required for additional Shadow Bolt reduced from 4 to 5. That's alright. That's a buff. Skeletal Mages, Bone upgrade fortify amount increased from 11 to 20. That's pretty good. That's a buff. Golems, the Iron upgrade. Attacks required for slam attack reduced from 5 to 4. That's pretty good. That's a buff. Like I said before with the core skills glyph, bonus now affects all damage instead of just the core skills. Like I stated with the other classes, I don't know too much about the Necro, so I can't speak on the specifics here. I'm going to go ahead and skip over the aspects and move straight onto the unique items. With Bloodless Scream, essence gained increased from 2 to 5 to 7 to 10. Deadless Visage, damage increased from 0.25 to 0.35 to 0.28 to 0.38. That's a small buff right there. Quite a few buffs and a few nerfs for the Necromancer. However, let's move on to the Rogue and see what we've got waiting for us. Advanced Rapid Fire, duration increased from 3 to 5 seconds, that's a buff. Caltrops cast speed increased by 15%, that's a pretty big buff. Enhanced Cold Imbuement, lucky hit chance increased from 30 to 40, that's a buff. Enhanced Smoke Grenade, damage bonus increased from 15 to 20%. Methodical Dash, maximum cooldown reduction increased from 3 to 4 seconds. Concealment Stealth duration increased from 4 to 5 seconds. Enhanced Dark Shroud, chance to not be consumed increased from 10% to 14%. That's actually a pretty good buff right there. Supreme Death Trap, cooldown reduction increased from 10 to 12 seconds. When it comes to our passives, the Victimized Lucky Hit chance was increased from 30 to 35. Siphoning Strikes now also requires a lucky hit chance of 75%. Rugged damage reduction against damage over time effects increased from 5, 10, 15 to 16, 12, 18. And Mending Obscurity, healing per second, while Stealth increased from 369 to 4812. And Aftermath Energy Restored increased from 25, 50, 75 to 30, 60, 90. Some pretty good buffs right there. Just like I mentioned before, when it comes to the core skills glyph, all effects are going to be now applied instead of just the core skills. Here with the specialization, preparation, ultimate cooldown reduction increased from 4 to 5 seconds. Looking at the legendary aspect changes here, the aspect of Volatile Shadows got a buff. However, in my opinion, the aspect isn't that good to begin with, and the extra 1,000 damage or so that you're getting isn't really going to do much in the end game when your build's hitting for multiple millions of damage. Right below that, we have a buff to the Icy Alchemist aspect, increasing the chill from 15 to 25%. Time will tell whether or not this is actually going to be viable or not, but I'm not personally going to be using it. However, I'm sure there's going to be some people that take advantage of this. The Shadow Slicer aspect got an absolutely massive buff. However, in my opinion, this aspect isn't that good and is super underutilized for a reason. So I'm not sure we're going to see people pick this up, despite the fact that it got buffed. The Toxic Alchemist aspect got a little bit of a buff. However, it's in the same boat as the aspect of Volatile Shadows. The damage that it does is just incomparable to the overall damage that you're doing during the end game. So I personally won't be picking it up and just don't see it as a viable option. The Vengeful aspect got a little bit of a proc buff. However, it's still not that viable nor that useful, so I won't be using it. The aspect of Imitated Imbuement got a little bit of a duration increase from 5 to 9 seconds, but it's really only useful when you're using specifically Shadow Clone. The aspect of Stolen Vigor got a quite considerable buff. I was once running this aspect. I'm going to have to go ahead and look at it again. I took it off because the values weren't that high and it just wasn't that viable. Now that it's got a buff, it might be though, so I'm going to have to give it a little bit more consideration. The aspect of Lethal Dust got a little bit of a buff, however I'm not too interested in that. Same goes for the aspect of Noxious Ice, which isn't too useful unless you're running some type of CC or cold build. And then the aspect of Elusive Menace got a little bit of a buff, however it's not too useful unless you're using the Close Quarters Combat key passive, which I don't. Right below that, in reference to the unique items, the Sky Hunter's energy gain increased from 15 to 25 to 20 to 30, a little bit of a buff there. And then with the Grasp of Shadow, the lucky hit chance increased from 20 to 30% to 24 to 34%, which isn't that bad, but it's not insane. That'll wrap it up for the Rogue. Moving on to the Sorcerer here, we can see that the skills, enhanced charge bolts, damage increased from 24 to 30%, and now benefits from skill ranks. This is a little bit of a buff. Destructive charge bolts, damage reduction increased from 20 to 25. That's another buff. Destructive incinerate, damage reduction increased from 20 to 25. Increased blades, cast cleanup has been tightened, allowing players to act after it's cast sooner. Firebolt, initial damage increased from 10 to 18. Wizard's Firewall, maximum increased mana regeneration increased from 25 to 35. Wizard's Blizzard, core skill mana cost reduction increased from 10 to 20. And Supreme Deep Freeze, cooldown reduction increased from 50 to 100%. Interesting. Elemental Dominance now also affects mastery skills instead of just core skills. Potent Warding duration increased from 3 to 9. Protection Barrier duration increased from 2 to 3. Align the Elements, damage reduction per second increased from 123 to 369. That's a pretty good buff right there. Mana Shield, damage reduction increased from 5, 10, 15 to 7, 14, 21. Devouring Blaze, bonus critical strike damage reduced from 10, 20, 30 to 7, 14, 21. Devouring Blaze, bonus critical strike damage to immobilize reduced from 25, 50, 75 to 10, 20, 30. Pretty big nerf right there. Fiery Surge, mana regeneration increased from 10, 20, 30 to 15, 30, 45. Little bit of a buff right there. Same thing applies with the glyph for this Paragon. And when it comes to the enchantments, Spark Enchantment chance to form Crackling Energy increased from 10 to 14. Frozen Orb Enchantment chance to cast increase 20 to 30. Incinerate Enchantment cooldown reduction from 18 to 14. And then the Hydra Enchantment mana threshold reduced from 300 to 200. Like I said before, I don't know much about the other classes, so I can't speak on any specifics. I'm going to go ahead and skip over the aspect section here and move straight to the unique items. The Gloves of Illuminator, Fireball damage reduction reduced from 65, 75 to 55, 65. Isu's Heirloom, critical strike chance from move speed increased from 15% to 25% to 20 to 30%. Edora's Overflowing Cameo, chance to release a Lightning Nova increased from 10 to 15%. Now we just have a few general changes to cover, mainly just these aspects here. The aspect of Disobedience got a maximum stack reduced from 100 to 60, reducing maximum bonus armor from 25 to 50% to 15 to 30%. This is actually a major nerf, and I'm not sure why they did it. We're going to have to see how this turns out, but I'm not in favor of this at all. I think this is getting rid of a lot of survivability for all the classes, and as a rogue, this is one of my main ways to get survivability, so I'm really not in favor of reducing this. The aspect of Retribution as well as the Exploiters aspect got a little bit of some nerfs, but I'm not too worried about those. The Starlight aspect got a resource restore increased from 10 to 20 to 20 to 40, so a little bit of a buff there. A few other little changes, but nothing too important. Moving on down here below that though, we have what's the main thing that I want to talk about here at the end, is just the item affixes and what they've changed. I'm not going to read all of this, as I've already been reading a whole bunch for you guys, and the video is already topping out on about 40 minutes now. Like I said, if you want to see any of this information for yourself, it's going to be linked down in the description. But mainly what I want to note here is that they added a couple of different affixes here that can be rolled to gear, so look out for those if you're interested in them. Besides that, it looks like the core stat bonuses all got a 50% reduction in strength. This is going to be pretty massive and is going to affect all of the outright damage on every class. I'm interested to see the impacts of this, as it seems like it's probably going to be pretty profound. On top of that though, we can see that the cooldown reduction has been reduced by about a third, and below that, critical strike damage of all forms have been reduced in some manner. But if we take our time here and scroll down a little bit, we can go ahead and see that there's been a massive amount of changes, not only increases but a few decreases to the different stats that you can roll on all your different gear. So that means that, are we getting a little bit of a nerf in regards to damage in other forms? Yes. However, if we see here, most of the damage outright in the game has been increased by a value of 25% or more, so this could make up the gap. Right down here at the bottom though, I want to mention a few things that are very important and crucial. They can't be left out, as the total armor got reduced by a third, and the damage reduction stats all got reduced by about up to a fourth. This is absolutely massive as they're cutting down the survivability for all classes, and I know personally this is what I rely on as a rogue, so you guys have got to watch out and make sure that you know what your class is actually capable of, as these damage reduction stats aren't going to be as powerful as they used to be. With all that being said, I know that's a lot of information being laid out in front of you, but hopefully that was able to help you guys understand what's to come Season 1 and what to expect going into the 20th. I hope this video helped you guys understand all these different changes. And also, if you guys are interested in staying updated with my content, my build guides, or anything really Diablo 4, don't forget to subscribe. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to drop any questions or feedback you might have down in the comment section. Thanks for watching, guys, and peace out.